All right, so here we are, your favorite mechanics of the world.
It's been so long, I grew a beard.
Yeah, that's right. We call it the World Champion Garage, right?
Here we are at World Champion Garage again.
It took us forever to get back together.
That's
Clay
right.
and I. A happy Martin Luther King Day.
Happy Martin Luther King
Day for those of you who celebrate it. The other ones are lucky got a day off.
Everybody.
Lazy bums. And he didn't come back until yesterday morning because he got stuck in St. Louis. Clay is a basketball coach, right? For one of the college teams here.
I'm doing that now.
Yeah, and to make some money, you have to have money coming in, right?
Yes.
So no retirement for him.
None.
Unfortunately. And they went to St. Louis for a game, and they got stuck because their bus broke down Saturday night. On the way home, they said, you can't leave St. Louis.
We had to stay.
So now it's Monday afternoon, Martin Luther King Day, and we were finally able to get a video going. And we're going to show you now what we did and what we have done so far and where it is at. And you get to see our $70 tool in action.
A lot of good stuff.
Yeah, all righty. Let me turn the camera around, and then Clay is going to take over the camera, and then I'm going to take over the camera, and then you will see what we got cooking here.
We are rolling.
All right, Clay said we're rolling. That's good. What you can see since the last time you saw our engine, or Clay's engine, I should say, is we got the intake back in. We have not fully installed this yet because we have to put the connecting rubber piece in there, and we have to get the plate to move. You can see it gets kind of stuck here. This is just sitting on top here loose at the moment. We were doing some testing. We filled it up with fresh oil. We cranked it over. We got beautiful oil pressure. All of that stuff is working. Everything is lubricated. We did a compression check, which came out really, really good. The only little bit weak cylinder is number 8 in the rear. All the other ones had around 10, 11 bars. This one came in right about 8.5, and the minimum is 7.5 bar pressure for that. But the engine is cold, so we're good here. We got already our power steering pump filled up, and we got the system full with antifreeze, so we got everything reinstalled here. The way we did this with the power steering pump is we took an old belt and we pulled the belt up with the electric drill, with our electric drill, and we ran it, and I kept pouring it in. We had the car jacked up, and Clay was sitting in the car turning the wheels, so we were draining out the old stuff, and we put the new stuff in there without the engine running. Because this is the last thing you want to deal with when you work on the fuel system on an old engine like this. Once you get it to start and you have no fluid here and you have the belts already hooked up to this, and we got the right belt pressure on it, you can see this, we can easily rotate them with 2 fingers. When you can rotate a belt like this with 2 fingers, basically like this, then you have the right tension. And so we got this in place, we got this in place. Now comes the fuel situation. When Clay got the car, the frequency valve, it is commonly known or called, and in some literature it is referred to as the frequency valve, was missing. So what they did is, in Texas, when they had the fire, let me show that first. You see, can we lower this? Yeah, carefully down. You can see here the damage from the fire. And this damage is exactly, if you look underneath here, where the fuel distributor is and where the valve is actually situated. And the way where this fire started, this is where the hoses connect to the feed lines, which are these 2 hoses here, which go in and out of the fuel distributor, supply line and return line to tank. They basically blew up, and then that fire spread and it destroyed the frequency valve, and that frequency valve has fuel coming in here, which is going to the return line together with the return line from the warm-up regulator, and that sprays fuel out here when this thing is open. And that is the fuel which sprayed down to the throttle body and burned up our switch. That's basically what it is. And these people here in Texas, they use this kind of a hose to repair this. I've never seen anything like it. And they have done quite a few repairs on this. They replaced all 3 fuel hoses with this. And then this stuff here, which is the air conditioning return line to the front here, you can see this. This hooks up right here to your receiver dryer. And they replaced this, obviously. It feels exactly the same as this hose. So we're going to replace these hoses here with regular 7.5 millimeter fuel hoses and this one, and then we have to screw this back into place. This is how far we got. So we had to buy, or Clay had to buy, a new frequency valve because this was completely gone. The output line, which is this here, had basically a crimped piece of tube on it to close this off, and they had moved the damper over back the way it was before on the earlier versions into the feed line where we got our pressure tester hooked up right now into that line. So they converted it back to a regular Jetronic, or at least that's what they were trying to do. This is a Jetronic Lambda version, or Lambda fuel distributor. This fuel distributor will not work with the regular Jetronic. And this is basically the same system what you have from 81 on in the 500 series and in the 380 series. And this is the last year they made the 450, but it had already the we call that the KA Jetronic, A for America, because it was an American requirement for the Lambda control. Or they call it the KU Jetronic for the United States. So you can either operate it KU or KA. That always implies this particular version of Jetronic, Jetronic with Lambda control. So we have K, KA, and then KE. That is the evolution out of this whole system. And now I'm going to take over the camera, and we're going to have Clay start, not start the car, but just turn the ignition on, and then we can see on how his fuel distributor he tried to rebuild but did not succeed is actually leaking. You see, we turned that on already, and this is our tester. Are you ready to get in there?
I'm ready.
They're watching you. Alrighty, just turn on, yep. So you can see now how they're leaking, and I tried to adjust the valves on those and I cannot adjust it. No, yeah, turn off. You want to turn on one more time, and we have absolutely no, just a second, we have no fuel pressure coming out of the top chamber. I have closed the switch, so the meter here, the pressure gauge, is directly hooked up to the upper chamber, disconnecting the warm-up regulator. And turn on one more time. You can see we have no pressure whatsoever going through there. And that is part of this, why this is leaking. That's it. So this is how far we are. We have to definitely rebuild the fuel distributor, has to be completely rebuilt. We have to now empty our little bottles here, but you can see the system works pretty well. So we can actually fully determine if something works and how well it works and how bad it is off. For $70, that is pretty nifty, I would say, and we have no leaks or dripping anything over on the system here, but we have no fuel pressure. You can see this, I have disconnected the return line actually. This is open, and let me go around. Please, and there's no return fuel coming out. So the distributor is completely clogged up. I mean, as much as clogged up as it can be. And we looked, since I printed out, or I was able to get the manufacturing dates, and we got the manufacturing date here was 086, right? That's what we said. So this got us into the year 2000, month of June for the warm-up regulator. So the warm-up regulator is going to be 22 years. It's 22 years old now. It's going to be 23 years old in June. And the fuel distributor has a 3 in it, which indicates it was rebuilt in the 90s instead of a 5. So that reads 931. That means this was rebuilt in January of 1999, which gets us now to 24 years. And you can see, even though with the cleanup it looks pretty good, but from sitting for all these years, it is completely shut. And this is the amount of fuel Clay had actually gotten into his engine when they first started this up. And he was very lucky. So we had the non-functioning spark plug. We had 2 or 3 or 4 leaking injectors. And we had this fuel flow coming out, even with the piston being in the off position where we shouldn't have any fuel coming out at all. And of course, it doesn't matter really if you push the plunger or not, because you have a constant fuel output. So 4 cylinders, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, and 5 got that much fuel that is almost 100 milliliters per minute. And the other ones, this is right about, I would say probably 5-6 milliliters per minute, and this would be around 10 milliliters per minute. These are also about 5 to 6 milliliters, so these are actually correct. The only problem is the plunger is in the off position, and none of these bottles should have any fuels at the moment. But this is all because this whole thing is completely clogged up on the inside. And the biggest culprit in this is ethanol, because that's what ethanol does, and you can clean it out. The only way you can remove the crystalline ethanol residue is with citric acid. In a hot acid bath, it has to be basically submerged in there, boiling with that acid in it, and it has to be boiled out similar to the way you boil out the engine block and the cylinder heads in an acidic bath. Or in a spray chamber. That is usually done at boiling temperature. You have to do the same thing with this to get this whole thing actually freed up. And we took off the valve, actually, the little adjustment valve here for cylinder number 4. We took it out, and the O-ring on that little green O-ring is white in color, and it is hard. It is rock hard. So none of these O-rings work anymore. So this is kind of where we are with Clay's car at the moment. So we need to get the rebuild kits. We're going to rebuild. We definitely have, there's no way around it. We have to rebuild the fuel distributor, and we're going to rebuild the warm-up regulator, because that is now, what did I say, 23 years old? Mm-hmm. Yeah, coming up 22 years, 23 years old. 15 years is maybe 17 if you're lucky, and the thing sat in a garage. If you had that parked outside anywhere or even in a barn and it didn't run for more than 6 months, you're going to have everything gunked up with that ethanol from the fuel in there. And, we got the fuel pump actually put back in there. We haven't shared that yet, no? We rebuilt the fuel pump assembly in the rear. We put a new strainer in there. The garage, which had been working on it, they had cleaned out the tank. So the tank is actually clean, and you can see we have clean fuel coming up here. So our rear system is fully working. Now we have to focus on the front. And the one line which we're actually missing, which I may have to make a new one, is the feed line for the warm-up regulator from the top output, because we can find it. On the KU Jetronic, so the American version with lambda control, they had moved the damper, which is the same damper from this here. It was connected here over here in line with the warm-up regulator. That was moved over with the frequency valve or timing valve. That is basically where that is now located. So, and then the other thing is they did a double connection here. You can see the lower connection here goes to this ring here connector that has the opening on it, and this is the return line from the warm-up regulator. They both come together into the pressure regulator system to the return here. So this is going straight back. And this is now part of the start process and the duty cycle. When the car is in warm-up mode, this will be at a 60-40 duty cycle, enriching the fuel mixture besides of the warm-up regulator. And that's why you have to have warm-up regulator number 68 in here and not the previous versions, because otherwise you're going to get too much fuel in there. If you have 68 installed and you don't have the frequency valve, then your mixture is going to be too lean when you start the car and when it is warming up to operating temperature. And that basically sums it up in a nutshell. We could pull the fuel pump relay and you could just show them how the car is actually cranking if you want. You want to crank it? Mm-hmm. We disconnected now the fuel pump relay because my little bottles are already full here. We don't want to overflow them. That's probably the only drawback on this system, is that they have a limited capacity, but I think that works just great. Are you ready?
Ready?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So we're good here. Yeah. And that is now with full oil pressure. And of course, in the fire, they had the hose. This is this here, which goes to Clay's dash here for the, I'm going to squeeze around here. We can turn the light on. That is the oil line for the oil pressure gauge here. Here. Cranko. It should take a little bit. There we go. And you can see now we got oil pressure. Beautiful. The battery is a little bit weak, but that could be worse. For the moment, we got everything what we need. It's a nice car. Look at them, huh? Have you screwed in the seats yet? No, not yet. We took the seats out and he put them in the other 78 450, right?
I'm going to switch them back
over. Yeah, and so we can actually get this running here pretty soon. This is basically our check-in, but you can see how the fire actually started. My guess would be that this happened probably on the highway while the car was running, and the person who drove had enough sense to pull the key immediately, and that stopped the fuel flow, and then it just burned whatever fuel it had, and that's what it looks like. You want to say something before we say goodbye, or you want to say goodbye?
I'm going to just...
Look at the proud Mercedes-Benz owner.
I can't wait to drive it.
Yeah.
It's going to be soon.
It's going to be soon. We're working hard on it. Yeah. Well, you guys have a great day and a great week, and we will be checking in from you.
Check back with
you. That's right. Peace.